Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for being here today. This is day 2 of our Care and Share, our big ideas. We've got 2 ideas today. Beth is going to begin, and then Tanya is going to follow up right away after Beth is done. During our presentations, you are welcome to share any ideas or suggestions or feedback in our chat room, which is open. And then once our presentations are done, we're going to open it up for a conversation. Just a reminder that I am recording our presentations and those archives will be available next Monday. If you are here for CEUs, you'll want to look for an email from me on Friday afternoon with an evaluation form. Complete the evaluation form and then look for an email in about 5 business days with your CEU certificate. So it's 5 days, 5 business days from the time that you submit the evaluation form. We do want everybody to submit feedback, but if you want CEUs, you are required to complete that evaluation. Okay, so I think we're going to start with Beth. So Beth, take it away.
Hi everybody, I'm Beth Suereth, founder of Caregiving Pathways, and I'm here today to tell you my big idea, which is everyone needs an end-of-life plan. Chances are your caree will experience a health crisis before the end of life. Approximately 50% of older adults visit the emergency department alone, much less have scheduled admissions to the hospital during the last month of life, which is typically considered to be the last month or so. But we sort of, used it for that. I talk about it in terms of that time period and some expanded time period along the way. The best time to have a sensitive conversation about things like an end-of-life plan is before a crisis occurs. So imagine a health crisis without a plan. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what the ins and outs are of a hospitalization, managing the end of life, who's involved, what your caree's thoughts are about what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And then consider a health crisis with a plan in place where people have discussed what the caree's wishes are beforehand. Everybody knows what they are. You can have it written out and shared so that it gives you plenty of time in advance to talk about things that are coming, but not during a crisis when we often aren't thinking clearly. We need to make a plan because we typically have a lack of experience with end-of-life situations, and that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. But what happens as a result is, because we don't have that experience, often you find out that somebody died by getting a phone call, and you're not there dealing with all the ins and outs of what really happens. And then when we aren't prepared, and we kind of look back and think, had I only known, you're left with a sense of lingering regret. And my motto is plan and prepare, or react and regret. And unfortunately, those are often the 2 options. Interestingly, a personal end-of-life plan actually dovetails with a financial plan. So we all want to make sure we have enough finances through the end, to manage through the end of life. And when we, if your caree ends up at a point where he or she can't speak for himself, then who actually has access to that person's funds to pay for the care? This could be care that goes on for years. So you want to make sure somebody has access to paying the bills, tracking expenses, who has accountability for all of that along the way, and which assets do you liquidate first? Does that impact different people's inheritances or taxes? I personally have this lovely spreadsheet here where I have mapped out everything to within an inch of its life, and I have an agreement in place with my designee and my backup designee. My entire family knows exactly what's coming, and they are sick of hearing about it, let me tell you, but they are going to be ready when I approach the end of life. So the big piece of this is that it helps avoid or resolve conflicts or disputes when it's all written out in a plan, in a spreadsheet with all of the access information. And it also gives you an opportunity to think about the quality of life during the last month of life, which, are there goals you want to accomplish? Let's say time is short. How do you most meaningfully want to use that time? If you ask your caree, you could be very surprised at what your caree wants to use that time to do. And is there an opportunity to express feelings about the end of life, and opportunities for family members or friends to express their feelings? So it gives an opportunity to really talk through the entire situation. How your caree wants to be remembered. Do you want to create a legacy project like a quilt or a garden or letters or videos? Is there an opportunity to make amends or smooth things out? You might want to share how much your caree has meant to you. Your caree may want to share that type of feeling with others. And 50% of older adults will visit the emergency department in the last month of life. Most of them are admitted. And plus there are those that are scheduled, but you want to be prepared for the hospital stay. Here's my How to Help Your Loved One in the Hospital guide that's free on my website. You want to make some decisions to be prepared for that with legal documents. What will life-sustaining measures, which ones will be used, and decisions about arranging for care after discharge. During the final weeks, you want to understand what your caree pictures. Ask your caree, what do you want to do? Who should be notified as time gets short? During the final days, where do you want to be? Do you want to be alone? Do you want your entire family there? Do you want solitude, music, candles, children, pets? During your actual final moments, what do you picture? And what are your thoughts about that you want to make sure happen or don't happen? And then after the final moments, notification. So this is a big one in the age of social media, where people will post about it and others find out who should have had a more personal contact. And you can ask your caree, what do you have in mind in terms of funeral arrangements and your obituary? What do you want us to say? What do you want us to leave out? Do you want to create it beforehand? So there are lots of materials out there now, as luck would have it. Starting conversations with families and doctors is difficult, but if you visit theconversationproject.org, they have fantastic materials for starting the conversations. Once those conversations are rolling, look at my site and find the free end-of-life planning guide and plan template that you can use the guide to think through all of the aspects that we just touched on. You can use the plan to really map out what you'd like, what your caree would like for the final days and moments. And there's more information on my website also about managing the hospital stay and planning for the end of life. But as I said, we pretty much have two options. It's plan and prepare or react and regret. And I'm a planner. I like to have it all planned out, and that gives me enormous peace of mind so that I can just go about my business, and I don't have to worry that if I'm in crisis or afterward, that I know that my family is going to have the information they need and they'll be equipped to deal with the situation.
Okay, thanks so much, Beth. So Tanya, we're gonna move over to you. So go ahead and unmute yourself, and Beth is gonna stop sharing, and then she'll let you start sharing. Okay, there you go. You're good to go.
So hello, everyone. My name is Tanya Straker. I'm a certified caregiving consultant and educator. And my topic, the name of my presentation for today is Self-Care is Not Enough. It's a little different from what is on your agenda, but the information, but it's all the same. It's all about supporting family caregiver well-being. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. So 2 years into providing total care for my mom, I had an epiphany. And in a flash, my feelings about having stepped into the role of unpaid family caregiver, a full-time family caregiver for my mom, my feelings about it went from really good to extraordinarily great. And I made a vow at that time that I would share my insight with as many family caregivers of aging parents as I could. So,
No.
what is it?
The bathroom when you go in.
What is it that I discovered? That my life for the last 2 years had not been on hold. That I had become a stronger, more formidable self. That I recognized that every day I was getting up, not knowing what the day would bring, and ready for anything. What I discovered is that I was on a hero's journey. So on that day, I coined the term, the caregiver hero's journey. And then I stepped back to try to figure out what exactly did I mean by that, and what meaning could it have for my fellow family caregivers. Because what I also knew on that day was that self-care was not enough. As a matter of fact, it was me reading another article telling me that as a caregiver, I needed to take care of myself. And my thoughts were, well, duh, of course I have to do that. I'm eating well. I am exercising. I'm engaging in my favorite activities. My spiritual practice is on point. But those aren't the things that had me address the cacophony of emotional stressors that I experienced stepping into the family caregiving role. The resentment, the anxiety, the depression, the isolation, and all of my concerns about the future, financial, and other. So as I continued, I tried to understand, so what was it that had gotten me to where I was? As what was this caregiver hero's journey about? And so what it's about is shining a light on the complexity and the richness of the inner life of the caregiver. And I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of it today: agency, mission, roadmap, and manual. So I'm going to start with the importance of agency. Shortly after bringing my mom home, I made a decision. I would honor her agency. She wasn't sick, and I would never see her as less than her former self. If she was going to use her agency as a self-directed adult to wake up in the morning with in a body that was racked with pain due to rheumatoid arthritis, challenged to make herself understood due to aphasia and dementia, unable to, dependent on others because her stroke had left her not functional on the right side of her body. If she was going to get up every morning and use her agency to live her life, then I had a duty to use my personal agency to do the same, to use it not only so that she was living her best life, but so that I was also living mine. So on practical terms, what that meant was that some days or sometimes her needs were going to be first, sometimes my needs were going to be first, but I set out to create some kind of life for us that would honor us both as empowered adults, both of us living our best lives. Second is mission. Joseph Campbell coined the term the hero's journey, and it refers to the series of events in all of those stories that inspire us to be our best selves. There's 3 acts. There's the call, the initiation, and the return. And as all the stories unfold, there's a hero that is called to a mission. They refuse to do the mission because it's going to be difficult and take them out of their comfort zone. But eventually, they heed the call. They step over the threshold into a mysterious type of world with all kinds of difficulties to carry out the mission. But there is one decisive battle in the end, and the hero is victorious. And with that starts their journey home. And on their journey home, they find more challenges, but in fact, they have been transformed, have let go of limiting beliefs, found more strength. And so with that, they return home transformed, and they return home with a unique gift for the world. So that's what I had discovered about myself in that moment, that I was on this mission. And what was really important about this model for me was to know that that first of all, I needed to hold on to my own dreams for my life. And that whenever my mission was complete, whether it was going to be in a few months or years in the future, I was going to perhaps have some challenges as I found my way back into my life. This model just seems so true for me as a caregiver that I accept it as true for all other family caregivers. But I began to think, was there a sequence of events that would be true for all caregivers? And so I set out to discover that by interviewing other caregivers. And I was to find out in time that there was a sequence of events because, of course, Denise Brown had been thinking deeply about this for years, and she had already identified what the sequence of events was for caregivers in her work, The Caregiving Years. So I call something happened here. Okay, so I call that the Caregiving Years, the roadmap and manual. And so what happened, the Caregiving Years, unlike the hero's journey, actually focus on the emotional landscape of giving care. And brilliantly, in the Caregiving Years, the strategies for dealing with the emotional landscape in each of the 6 phases of caregiving care is laid out for you. In the beginning, the call, there's the strategy of asking to deal with the emotions that come up at that time. And at the end of the return, the treasure, strategies for dealing with the emotions in that part of the phase. And she also provides strategies for every other aspect of the journey. So for me, coming across the Caregiving Years was like giving me oxygen. It was giving life to all the things that were not articulated in anything else that I had looked at in terms of understanding my experience as a caregiver. So the Caregiver Hero's Journey, again, shines a light on 3 different aspects of a caregiver's emotional experience. So again, it is and emotions equals meaning. So again, it's a shining light on how rich and complex the caregiver's emotional experience is. And the Caregiver's Hero's Journey gives meaning to the lives of a caregiver, be independent of all the things that they do for their caree. So what am I asking? What is my call to action? To be a warrior in sharing and shining light on the richness of the caregiver's experience, agency, mission, roadmap, and manual, to see all carees as self-directed and empowered, even those who are living in bodies that are fragile and whose minds are unreachable. Support caregivers in holding a vision that supports both their life and their caree's life. To support caregivers seeing themselves as heroes in their own life, still holding on to their dreams and hopes for themselves. And finally, just sharing the Caregiving Years roadmap and manual. And doing all this, why? Because in my experience, self-care was simply not enough.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. Thank you for spotlighting my work. And I actually will include a link to the Caregiving Years 6 Stages to a Meaningful Journey as part of our archives that I release next week. So let's talk about what we just heard. I actually have a couple questions to get us started. And please feel free to unmute yourself. If you have a question, just say, Denise, I have a question, and also post in our chat room. So Beth, it seems to me like really the big idea is, what if we all had an end of life plan? What would be the impact? So what's the impact if everybody has an end of life care plan? What's that impact on the healthcare system?
Well, for the hospital stay, for starters, physicians, nurses would understand where people are coming from. Preferably as a primary care physician, for example, you would have had the conversation with the primary care physician. When you get to the hospital stay, your information is part of the electronic health record. And so everybody would have a line of sight to what it is that the types of care you want, the types of care you don't want, what's important to you in life relative to medical care that you may or may not want to receive. So all of that would be laid out in advance. I mean, right now, the healthcare system has to take the time and energy away from actually providing care to you to discuss what care you want. Because there are options. There's, the recommendation of physicians, but there's how that factors into what your agency and how you want to live out the rest of your life, especially if you are near the end of life.
So I'm curious, for those who are joining us today, how many of you have created an end-of-life care plan for yourself and or for family members? Okay, so can you type in the chat room that you've done it? And also, I'd love to know when you did it. How long ago did you do it? Is it recent, within the past year, several years? How did COVID motivate you to do it? I just would love to hear from you guys about that. And as you type in the chat room, whether or not you've created such a plan, Beth, my second question to you is, I think the big impact on the healthcare system is savings. Then we don't call 911 at the end of someone's life. So we know that the bulk of Medicare dollars are spent at the end of life, and that we really need to think about how we can spend that money really more effectively, not only to support the caree, but also to support the family. So a shifting of dollars could really be efficient and effective. And I also think that can absolutely change what happens for the family caregiver after caregiving ends. We know there's a lot of regret about over treatment during a caree's last weeks. We think, oh my gosh, should I have done that? What if I hadn't? Did I make them uncomfortable? And I think if there is this plan in place that people feel supported to put in place, it can change really that whole experience for the caree and for the family caregiver. So and actually, I think I just answered my question. So Beth, what's the impact then, if everyone in the family has an end-of-life care plan, what's the impact on the family?
Yeah, on the family, it's much less stressful. So any hospitalization is stressful for the entire family. And if everybody understands what the caree wants to have in place, doesn't want to have in place, then they can just have the discussion with the care team, and there isn't all this angst among the family. Everyone's got a different opinion about what they think should happen, what they think the caree thinks should happen or would want in the event that the caree can't communicate. So all of that swirling anxiety and indecision can not take place. It just doesn't need to be there. So if we talk it out beforehand, write a plan, share it with everybody, then everybody knows. And when the time comes, you just carry out the plan.
Yeah, thanks to everybody who's sharing in the chat room. And Teresa has a really good point. She says, everyone shouldn't have an end-of-life plan because as a social worker, I often work with family members who have conflicting thoughts or plans for their loved ones. Absolutely. This takes the focus off the patient, these dysfunctional conversations, and the care is delayed. Yeah, absolutely. And in times of stress, we might default to behavior that's not necessarily helpful or healthy. That is a nice way to say that. So that adds to the stress around that whole conversation. Thanks to those. Oh, go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, and Denise, as you said, there's so much care in the end of life that is delivered because people are indecisive and they think, oh my goodness, I have to do everything I possibly can for my caree. And that may or may not be true given the circumstances. And as you also said, there's often a time where overtreatment ends up in a lot of pain for the caree. It's terrible for the caree to experience. It's terrible for the family to watch. To watch somebody you love in pain, I think is actually the worst experience. And so to avoid all of those types of things with a plan in place is huge.
So what's the life event that triggers the end-of-life planning process? So just to give you some context, so Heather is writing in the chat room that she was in her 30s when she started hers. And someone else talked about, it was Teresa, she got married and that started her planning process. And I think if we can attach it to a life event, it becomes this natural, oh, I got married, so now I create this plan. What do you think, Beth?
I think that whenever you start, those are excellent. Another good trigger is when you start to think about life insurance. Typically, people put life insurance in place. When you get a job, you typically get, if you have a full-time permanent position, you get a certain amount of life insurance. And then when you start to have children, you really think, oh, I need to be sure that I can provide for these children. If you have a spouse, the spouse can, ultimately could support him or herself. But so when you start thinking about life insurance, that is a great time to think, okay, so what would happen with that life insurance? What's going to lead up to having that life insurance, be triggered? And so when you start all those types of thought processes, it's just one incremental little step to make a big plan around that life insurance.
Yeah, and Sherry's writing in the chat room, I did it for my dad because it was too overwhelming for my mom, right? I had to create a succession plan to ensure he got the care he needed when he was transferred from the hospital to the rehab center. And what a great point that there are times in our life where it is literally impossible for us to think about it because we are so stressed out. And in many ways, we are just caught up in the grief of the experience. And if we can save our family from that experience because we have the plan in place, it makes us easier to feel like we were present to support our caree when he or she really needed it.
And the peace of mind that brings for the family caregiver is just enormous. I mean, I've just met so many people who live the rest of their lives with regret. And I was lucky enough, just darn lucky, as it turns out, that I don't have regret about the way my family, my sister and I handled my father's care at the end of life. But it almost went the other way. And I can't tell you how I would have regretted that. But the peace of mind I have every day, knowing that he, the end of his life was very peaceful, and the peace of mind is just enormous forever.
Yeah. So Sherry's working on hers, and she is caring for her mom, and she actually created the plan at the beginning of her mom's cancer battle. So I think it is helpful to think about significant life moments and then use that as an inspiration to start the conversation and start the planning process. Beth, what professionals would you suggest we engage when we're creating the plan? You had talked about insurance. So there's the insurance guy. Who else?
Sure. Attorneys, if you're going to make any sort of estate plan, a will, living will, a healthcare proxy document, naming somebody who can make decisions for you. A financial planner, and certainly, a certified caregiving consultant like myself and many of us are really well equipped, having lived through the experience to, point out pitfalls, really help make a detailed plan that addresses the things that you wouldn't expect because you haven't experienced this before. So any number of professionals who deal with anything that comes into play during an extended illness or toward the end of life or even after.
This is Diana.
Oh, yes, go for it. Go for it, Diana.
I have a question. I've not heard anything about hospice. I had 20 years experience in hospice, and most people think hospice has to be the last few days of life, when truly the best benefit is when patients have 6 months or less to live, as they say. My favorite patients were the ones that were still, the gentlemen that were still going fishing and the ladies that were going out to eat with their friends regularly. So as they deteriorated, they were already in hospice, and we'd already discussed all this information that you're talking about. So we already had our plan set up. It was worked out with the family because we worked with the social worker, the chaplain, everybody in the team. So as the patient's condition deteriorated, they knew what was going to happen. They knew what the expectations were. They'd already met the hospice team, and we were seeing them intermittently. So as they got worse and we increased our visits, it was like a family. I mean, they felt like a family was taking care of them. So I just was wondering where you thought hospice maybe fit into this, because I really hadn't heard anything about hospice.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. And it is an important point. And part of creating a care plan, an end of life plan, so when the care plan moves to an, shifts to an end of life plan, is that discussion about hospice and where it comes in. And I always point out to people that clinicians will often not even bring up the topic because they're fearful. They've gotten terrible responses from people saying, you know, you're just terrible responses. So I think that's a huge piece of a good care plan, is to say there will come a time when the active care plan will shift into palliative care, and to make hospice part of that as early as possible. And that even if you don't think you're eligible for hospice, once you understand what eligibility really is for hospice, that you can ask for an evaluation at different times. You can ask to come under hospice. Then if your situation changes, you can leave hospice care and go back to curative care rather than comfort care. And so that's a big piece of the discussion, is all of those pieces that fit in with how the health system works.
And I agree, it's rarely.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Diana, and then we're going to go to you, Maureen.
Okay.
Okay, hold your thought. Hold your thought.
But I agree that hospice is rarely brought up. And you brought up palliative care. Patients can still be in treatment and receive palliative care, because palliative care is going to manage their symptoms. And so that's a big piece that people don't always understand. And most hospitals now, or most care centers, have a palliative care team, where you can be referred to the palliative care team and see them on an outpatient basis to manage all your diarrhea, constipation, pain, depression, any kind of symptom that you have. So, and then I agree with you on hospice, they can always make an evaluation at any point in time and explain the hospice program to the patients.
Thanks for being here again today, Diana.
You're
Yeah, and I
welcome.
think it's, go ahead,
My
Diana.
chat's not working, I can't chat, so.
Oh. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's important to find out what hospice is, talk about palliative care versus hospice, what the difference is, where the overlap is, and to have those discussions so people can digest that information before they need it.
I totally agree with both of you. And I was going to suggest that basically that's a good starting point and a little less scary to start with palliative care. The other thing is to not use the hospice word, the H word, as we say, because that's also very scary to people, but just to talk in generalities about all of the benefits before you even say what that is, what hospice is. I've been I also worked home health hospice years ago, but ever since I was a nursing student, have been a huge proponent and advocate for hospice. Had the pleasure of actually, as a nursing student, our whole class met Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and got to hear her whole, information about her research with death and dying. And so my whole nursing career, I have definitely advocated for hospice. And early on, not this last day or 2 days before or a week before, that's not the full benefit or the purpose of hospice. Was able to utilize it with both of my parents. And so, definitely.
Thank you, Maureen. And you know what? You have some fans in the chat room now because you've met Elizabeth. So you'll have to share some more in the chat room about what that was like.
Yeah, and Maureen, thank you so much for that. I think that is so helpful, especially to say that, to talk about describing what hospice is, and then sort of loop around to, and that's hospice. So I think that's brilliant. I actually wrote that down and I'm totally using that.
Well, and I used to explain to patients that that we would graduate patients from hospice. If their condition did not deteriorate, that we would graduate them and that they could always come back to hospice. So that was a big thing for patients, because most of them thought once they were in hospice, that was the end. But many times we would graduate patients, they would be out for a few months and then they would come back to hospice as their condition deteriorated.
Well, that's awesome. I wrote that down too. So I'm learning today too. This is great.
And I also want to mention that if you have an end-of-life plan discussion when you're really healthy, decades before end of life happens, you can have a really unemotional conversation about hospice. the conversation about hospice is difficult because of the emotions with it. So if I have a conversation with my siblings and I say, you know what, when I can't do this or this and the doctor says this, please just get hospice. Don't even worry about it. Don't even feel like you're giving up. Please do it for me. That's the beauty of having a conversation early on. And I should also mention too, that when you talk about your power of attorney for healthcare and finances, also really think about a power of attorney for love, because how you love and who you love changes at the end of your life. And I would want my siblings to know that if I'm in a facility and I fall in love and they're like, holy crap, that guy's a wacko and I'm happy, they should just be happy for me.
That is awesome, Denise.
Yeah.
I'm totally writing that down too.
So I have done in the past, and I probably should bring it back out. In the past, I've done presentations around, you should also get a power of attorney for love, to have that conversation early on, even a conversation around, okay, Dad, what happens if Mom has dementia and you fall in love? How do you want us to manage that situation? It just helps the family navigate really uncharted waters because you've had an honest conversation. Okay, so Tanya, I have a couple questions for you. I am so interested, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. I'm interested in the words that you use, particularly the word hero. And I like how you actually presented it to us, because oftentimes when we're in a caregiving situation, people will call us saints. And we think, oh my God, the last thing I am is a saint. And then they might go to that hero, you're a hero. And we feel like it's false praise. So I'm curious, how does that word land for you? And how do you work through this whole idea of, oh my gosh, I'm just doing my best, I'm not a hero?
Well, it's because I'm using the term hero as, for me, seeing myself as a hero for taking on a mission. It's very different from, it's like I'm a hero in my own life. That's what's so hard to describe. I'm a hero in my own life for being willing to step out of something uncomfortable into something I knew nothing about, scared, but saying I was going to do it anyway. And that's very different from, you know, because that awful response I often had when people were saying to me, oh, you're so blessed for taking care of your mom, or, you know, or they would see me and, you know, the first thing they do is they want to talk about my mother. And I'm thinking, could I just have like 5 minutes of just, you know, I love her. I'm there all the time. I've dedicated my whole life to her. Could we not keep talking about that? So yeah, it's a different way. It's different, hard to describe that it's a different, and I'm not a hero because I'm taking care of my mother. I'm a hero because I chose to do something that was really uncomfortable and I was terrified about it. And thinking I was like, what am I doing? My career, no money, my house, how am I gonna, you know? And then I found out that I realized how not to worry about anything. You know, eventually I figured out, you know, how not to worry. So I was a hero in my own life.
Yeah, I love that shift. So important for us. It's about choosing the words that we feel describe where we are in life. So my question to everybody, and I'd love to hear your answers in the chat room, is what's your heroic act today? And I'd love to hear from you in the chat room. And Heather has written in the chat room to you, Tanya. She says, I loved your presentation. I can relate to this firsthand as I took care of my mother for about 2 years. I wish I had known this information then. It would have really helped me with the stress of that time period. I got sick of people telling me to take care of myself, when, as you say, that is not enough.
Yeah, I'm so glad, because sometimes I would just feel like I'm such a curmudgeon, you know, stop telling me to take care of myself.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think anyone who has been in that caregiving situation, you just feel the come out when someone says, you know, if you just took care of yourself, oh my heavens, oh my heavens. Okay. So I also liked, Tanya, that you really pulled out that we have strengths that are inherent to our journey. And it reminded me of positive psychology, which is this idea that we can talk to a coach or a consultant about our strengths. And we don't have to worry about trying to fix our weaknesses. What we want to do is really improve our strengths. So what were your strengths when you cared for your mom?
As I'm doing a presentation tomorrow in which I will just let it be known that, as I say, if there were, I could think of 100 careers that I would choose before I ever said I would be a nurse, a CNA, or a home health aide. And then here I was going, yes, I'm going to provide, total care for someone with a stroke. But so my strength was observation. That's what got me through. I observed something, I didn't know what to do. I was just going to ask. So I let go of my discomfort with everything relating to nursing care and just focused in on what did excite me, which is problem solving. So knowing that about myself, I found plenty of problems to solve, and just didn't worry about how disconnected I was to that, giving that type of nursing comfort that I imagine that other people are able to give.
So Sherry is writing that for her, taking care of herself came when she realized she was a partner in the care relationship and that her needs were as important as her carees.
Yeah, I part of my coming to this, creating this was, realizing that one of my neighbors was still like grieving over all she hadn't done, and her father had passed, and she was still in the grieving mode for not having done enough when she had done everything. So it still touches me that, what can we do to help people to see themselves in a partnership and to recognize that we're both together in a challenging situation. So how do I forward it forward for both of us? As opposed to losing myself into this caregiving thing, which I could never do enough. I could never have done everything I wanted to do.
So Danelle is writing in the chat room, a hero resonates differently from being a saint because heroism includes feelings of fear, uncertainty, and Achilles' heel to overcome.
Yeah.
So the question that we don't like to hear when we're caring for a family member is basically, are you taking care of yourself? So what are different questions that we could ask family caregivers that help them see that they are the hero in their journey?
I actually had some questions at this moment. I can't think of any, but I have thought of some to really, because you can't tell somebody they're a hero if they don't feel it. They're just going to reject it. So, so after the fact, actually, one of the ways that I've used the caregiving years, Denise, is to actually ask people, where are you in the journey? And then say, oh, so if they've already gone through the first journey, just ask them to talk about it. And then they start having insights about, oh, I did do that. So, just talking about the caregiving journey and having people walk through it allows them to see all the things that they did to get them from one phase to the next phase to the next phase.
So there are a couple suggestions in the chat room. So Sherry is saying the question can be, what can I help you do? And C. Abels is suggesting, what do you need from me today? Both powerful questions, open-ended too, which is the kind of questions that we just love.
This is Diana. As a hospice nurse, I used to praise the caregivers every time I went, just telling them what a good job they did and how impressive it was. A lot of caregivers were doing things that were amazing to care for their loved ones at home. And the other thing is, I would tell them too if their loved one had said anything, because many times a loved one will say, you know, I'm so lucky that my daughter's taking care of me, or I'm so glad I didn't have to go to a nursing home, or lots of things that they will say that they won't say to the person who's taking care of them. So I would share that so that they would know that their loved one was really appreciative that they were actually caring for them at home.
So it's like how to bring out all of the creative responses that people are every day. They're coming up with new ways of doing things, you know, and so it's how to get them to talk about and to recognize their brilliance at any given moment. So again, with this, you know, what, you know, I don't know if the questions are just that obvious of, so what have you, you know, what have you done today? You know, so like trying to get out what's gone well, like you're saying, positive psychology, what's going well in your life. Have you come up with any magic over the last couple of days to, you know, to deal with your mother's, you know, anger or, you know, something, and just getting people to speak to, oh yeah, I did do that, you know. Oh yeah, I did. I'm the one that figured out that, you know, to bring somebody to do her nails, or, you know, trying to bring out those little things that people have done that that they don't get to talk about much.
In many ways, those are miracles, because it's not just one attempt. It is the culmination of sometimes years and months of attempts. Years ago, we used to do a miracle meter on a community I used to run, and we would keep track of the miracles in our days. And the whole point of this was that you looked for the miracles then.
Right.
If you tell your mind where to look, that's why questions are so great. Then the mind looks for the answer. And there are miracles that happen in our day. We just don't necessarily label them as miracles. We just think, oh, what a coincidence. Oh, that was a little bit of good luck. And if we look at them as miracles, then we have a feeling of being blessed, right? Feeling like there is help for me, even if I can't see it or name it. I am surrounded by it. So we have just about 3 minutes left. What last questions do you have for Beth or Tanya before we close?
Yeah. And thank you. I just want to bring out that question. It's what's going on? Ask about life outside. You know, what's going on for you outside of your life outside of caregiving. Of course, that's a great question. So recognizing for someone that there is a life outside of caregiving, and being able to really allow the caregiver to talk about it, I think is so powerful.
Okay, so I guess I will leave a couple calls to action with everybody, and that is to look into your tomorrow and think, what will be my heroic act tomorrow? And who will I engage in a conversation about end of life? So how can you start that conversation within your family? Maybe it's just one person within the family, and then expand it. And then Sherry's just offering one last comment, which is give people space to feel whatever they are feeling at the moment. Absolutely. One of the reasons that I think we all kind of, at the word saint, or at that you've got to take care of yourself, is this idea that we need to be fixed and that we're doing something wrong, when the reality is we're doing so much right, and it's the enormity of the responsibility that we are managing. It's not that we are wrong, it's how hard the experience in the situation can be day to day.
Where can I get the recording? Because I'm sorry I was late due to a conflict, but.
Yeah, I'll post all the recordings on Monday.
Oh, okay, great.
The 12th, yeah,
okay.
Next Monday. Okay, and then tomorrow we have 2 more ideas. We do start on time, so if you can show up on time, that would be great. The link is the same every day. I do send out reminders in the morning, but if you just save one of the reminders, it's the same link every day. Okay. Go ahead.
I can make Thursdays and Fridays. Tomorrow I have a conflict again.
Oh,
so.
I bet tomorrow's going to be the best, but that's all right.
I'll listen to the recording.
You can listen to the recording. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday or Friday.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody so much. Thanks for the great conversation. Thanks to our presenters, Beth and Tanya, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Same time, same place.
Denise, thank you so much for this whole week.
Thanks everybody.
It's a
Bye-bye.
wonderful idea.